So when I imagine the Afterlee Ecovillage, I imagine a place built for a sustainable future where people tread lightly on earth and support one another and create meaningful relationships and have reverence for nature, have humility, and where potlucks are a competitive sport. That's our vision for the Afterlee Ecovillage, and that's why we've gathered here today. And before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Bunjalung people. We recognize and respect their elders, past, present, and emerging. Let me introduce myself. My name is Cyprien Clerc, or Cyprien Clerc. I'm originally from France, hence the accent and the unwavering belief that good bread should be a human right. I've been on the board of the Afterlee Ecovillage since its inception for the last 2.5 years, and I'm also the host of the Future Seeds podcast. Today is the third and final information session we're holding to present the Afterlee Ecovillage. And each session had a theme, which enables us to dive deeper in the conversation each time. On 1st of February in Kyogle, we explored farming and agroforestry. On the 15th of February in Lismore, we explored housing. And today, the conversation is going to revolve around the essence of community life. So relationships, communication, and conflict resolution. Yes, I am joined by two remarkable human beings today. Shane Sylvanspring is sitting here, who's a town planner, an eco-village educator, and social activist, who has a passion for designing regenerative communities. As a managing director of PRC, he spent 13 years in strategic planning, co-founding and guiding multiple intentional communities, including Afterlee. His expertise in navigating planning regulation has been instrumental in planning this project. Basically, if you've ever wondered how to legally turn your dream into a village, he's the guy. And Carol Perry here is our guest for today's interview. And she's a senior insight meditation teacher, conflict resolution consultant with 30 years of experience, and the co-founder of Dharmananda, an intentional community in the area where she has lived for decades. She teaches communicating mindfully, a practice that integrates awareness, presence, and deep listening. In other words, she has the patience and the wisdom to guide us through the inevitable whose turn is it to clean the compost toilet. In our interview with Carol today, we'll try and go through the joys and the challenges of community life, the importance of conflict resolution, and how to create strong and resilient relationships. After that, Shane will take over and present Ecovillage principles and the actual Afterlee Ecovillage project, the vision, the values, the infrastructure, the housing options, and tell you how you can get involved. So thank you all for being here. Your presence here matters, and it's my belief that just by being here today, you're already contributing to a world where we can nurture both the people and the planet. So let's explore together, and join me in welcoming Carol Perry to the stage. Cuckoo.
Cuckoo.
Thank you, Carol, for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Cyprien, and the Afterlee potential community, and Shane, thank you.
So you spent decades living in this intentional community and working in conflict resolution. My first question for you is, what originally drew you to this way of life, and what has kept you committed to this way of life?
I was drawn to it because I looked at the trajectory of my life if I'd lived the norm, and I just could not face living the norm. And at the same time, this was in the late 60s and early 70s when I was considering how I would live. It was very clear, the writing was already writ large on the wall about where our civilization was taking itself through its obsession with consumerism and materialism and military industrialist complex and so on. And I didn't want to be participating in that, and I could see that the life of individuals would become more and more controlled, and the main control that they have over us is ensuring that we are up to our ears in debt. And then you are owned by the banks. We always say our land is owned by the bank. No, we are owned by the bank. And that then guides your choices or limits your choices about what you can do with your life. And I didn't want that, and I've had a lot of choice of how I live in my life because I haven't been drowning in debt.
Okay, what's kept you?
Oh, what's kept me? Because and this is, I think is unusual, but it's important, I had made a fundamental choice quite unconsciously, because I didn't know those words in the we bought the land in 72. I didn't know those words then. I had a fundamental choice about living in community, because there's a big difference between land sharing and community.
Yeah, the difference between a collection of houses or a community.
Yeah, so it's either what Dr. Peter Koch from Monash University, who started the Murramurra community in Victoria, called it, which is what happened to Murramurra, is it devolves into a rural suburbia. Or if you work very hard, and community is not a consequence of sharing something. Actually, the consequence of sharing something, if you look at easements and the money that goes into the pockets of lawyers over sharing a little access route, we're not very good at sharing. And we tell our kids, oh, you must share, the little toddlers, oh, share this, share that. They learn from what they see. They don't see sharing amongst most of us. So that's a big brushstroke, but that's not what they actually see. And so sharing requires a great maturity. And I think we'll probably move on to what that maturity looks like. A sort of a growing up. And a community grows you up. But because I'd make a fundamental choice about community, what kept me there was the love of it. And when it was difficult, which it often is, the desire to put every effort into helping to make it work with the other people, because that's what I want. Because if I had left there, I would be back in same old, and that's not what I wanted.
Okay, so at Dharmananda you've lived for about 50 years,
yes,
with more or less the same people, even though new ones might come in.
Yeah, new ones.
So what's the key ingredient? What are key ingredients for maintaining long-term harmony?
Well, commitment to wanting community, because I think what happened was in the 70s, when all the multiple occupancies started happening, was people said they wanted community but actually wanted cheap land, and community was a secondary sort of choice. And so there wasn't, when things got difficult, which is, like in any relationship, when all the sexual hormones have worn off about 3 years in, you're faced with the reality of the other person, not just the pleasure they give you. That's a reality of human beings. When the pleasure they give you stops, that's when we have to have a huge number of skillful, we have to learn the skills of communication when people have very different points of view.
I think just before we started the interview, when we were talking, you already gave me a piece of information. I think that's kind of the answer to that question. What's the ingredient? You were talking about the capacity to integrate diversity.
Yes, so we say we love diversity, We hate it. We think diversity is those big things, you know, ethnic or sexual preference, and mostly we can keep that at bay. But diversity is a different opinion. People hate it, and I made an income off that for 3.5 decades. Because most people think that if someone has a different opinion to your own opinion, that it's actually a criticism of oneself. And we then have to engage our energy to make them agree with us. And that's what you walk into when you walk into, you know, a community or anywhere, a family or a couple or any business or group activity and so on, is that people are trying to homogenise each other, and it simply doesn't work.
So what does work? How do you absorb diversity?
That is what we have to realise. I think we are going from a culture of very poor communication of all those issues of that's the sea we swim in, to if someone doesn't agree with us, we try and change their mind, or we go into a very triggered state, reactionary state of door slamming, humping, you know, all sorts of things, and making them the cause of your upset. The cause of your upset is your view of it. It's not because a person can, you know, someone could run naked through this room and everyone would have it, someone would be delighted, someone would be shocked,
outraged.
Someone would be appalled. You know, there'd be so many views. It's not the naked person, it's your view of it that causes you upset. When we start to see that, and that takes a very, very long time to see, but it's a very lovely pathway to relaxing your whole system, your whole nervous system starts to relax when you can see the reality of our human reactivity and not make it wrong or bad, because if we make it wrong or bad, we can't look at it and then make choices about taking a different pathway, which is a hard pathway.
I think it's interesting because it's quite contrasting with the other thing you told me, which was you absolutely have to learn to cut to the chase and be able to say no.
Yes, so communication is complex, and one of the things when you live with a lot of people is that people have been conditioned into, especially women, into compliance and no ability to say no or set boundaries. Is that how you would see your conditioning? Very difficult. And then you transfer yourself from wherever you've come from, the city or some other town or something, into the culture of the far north coast, which is peace, love and brown rice. And it's wrong to say no. I've been in so many communities, they want something to stop, but not one person will say no. And that's what I did for the community I live on. I was the person who could say no in the most, the kindest way possible that you can do that. But there were some people that just weren't suitable to be living there. And other situations. So we have to be able to learn to set boundaries for ourselves, because otherwise what you do is you go into resentment. If you can't say no, the next stop in your mind is going to be resentment, and then you've externalised it on this other person stopping me having what I want. The resentment grows up, it hardens, and then the community starts, that's how it starts to move into a rural suburbia, where suburbias are places where people, if you're upset with a neighbour, you shut your gate or you hose them. I used to have, I started a community mediation, the first one in Lismore in the mid-80s, I think it was, and I learned that Australians are the most hosed population. Because someone's tree root was growing through their lawn, the solution was to hose them. So the person hosed them, and then the people next door whose tree root it was would throw their garbage over that. But that's a very physicalised version, isn't it, of what we do. We hose people verbally, and then we throw the garbage over our fence at them, and then things decline.
The reality is that disagreements in any groups you can't avoid them.
Of course.
Especially in intentional communities.
Yes.
So what are some of the most common sources of conflicts you've seen, and how to navigate them skillfully?
Oh, well, dogs and cats are one of them, and I think you've already had a bit of an innings on that. You can't have half a dog or half a cat. There's no compromise on dogs and cats. It's either no or yes. And, or you could keep it indoors. That's painfully cruel. So dogs and cats are one of them. Another huge one, when you've got shared land, there's always, even if you've got, in this community, will you have freehold title to your house?
We have one title for the co-op.
One title, okay, all right. So then there's a big shared maintenance situation on the shared land. And if people aren't, mostly what happens is that a few people do it, and most people are very happy to sit back and let them do it. So so that's a very common thing, the sharing the load, or I call it pulling your weight, is one of the biggest things. People get, and especially the people who are doing the load, get incredibly resentful when people sit back and also criticize. So that the other thing that happens, they sit back, I've seen it all, and then criticise the person who's doing it for not doing it properly, or think of extra things that need to be done that they're not going to put any energy into, but expect these doers to do it. There's, every issue that exists. So, we went through COVID. If there was, another plague, or some people don't think it was that, but anyway, let's just take it for this example, is that we could have had a big internal fight we could have made that into a big internal fight. And you can do that. And I think Mullumbimby did have a big internal fight in the community at large about that. So we just worked out what we would do together, and we didn't make it anyone's business or the community business what they chose to do with their bodies, but we just agreed to keep separate till, as much as we could, and you can, because working the veggie garden, and we stopped we had community meals, but we didn't come to them. You just brought a tiffin and it was served out to you, and you could take it away. And so we just did what was required at the time by the authorities. But we didn't turn it into a fight, which is what I think happened largely in coastal areas. It was turned into a massive fight.
I was told that yesterday at the big event in Lismore, you spoke about true sharing and personal freedom.
Yes, so that goes back to my comments about being owned by the bank. When you share resources, we have an incredible sharing of our, a group laundry, an incredible, well-resourced wood workshop, metal workshop. We share the tools for all the farming tools, the chainsaws and the mowing equipment and so on. We share a community garden where each one of us grows food. I grow all the carrots. Well, I'm getting a bit old to be doing that, but I've grown all the carrots for decades. Someone grows all the broccolis, and the trust is enough that anyone can go to the garden, pick what they want. In the cheese fridge, there's all the cheeses that we make, 3 types of cheeses. In the meat fridge, where we are a subsistence farm, in the meat fridge, it's just sitting there and you go and take it. From the bulk food pantry, for the things we can't produce ourselves, it's sitting in the pantry and you go and take it. And you've put in a very small amount into the kitty for everything, all the costs of running the farm, paying the rates, $70. Well, it used to be it was $60 for years. We just recently put it up to $70. So you could live off that. If you want smoked oysters, you have to go and buy them. But you could live off what we grow, enormous amount of vegetables, fruit, and the other, the produced items, cheese and so on. It's all on trust, and no one carries on about, because it doesn't happen. No one takes, why would you do that? Take more than you need. And of course everyone has that small amount of waste that happens in the back of their fridge, but no one's, isn't that right? We're not harassing each other about, are you wasting stuff in the back of your fridge? Because everyone does it. It's just the nature of fridges, isn't it? So there's this incredible trust, and no one goes down and picks every bit of broccoli and then goes and sells it to someone. It just doesn't happen because we trust each other. And when you create that atmosphere of trust, which is each person committing to being reliable in an ethical sense, and reliable in the sense of pulling their weight how they can, according to their strength and capacities and so on.
What's the recipe for building healthy trust, and does that require compromise?
I don't think so, because we run a very big complex system. Buildings, the larger farm, the pastures, the cattle, the vegetable gardens, the maintenance of building in this decay-prone climate and so on. The people cooking dinner, the people milking the cows, all the jobs that people are committed to, people actually do them. And if someone comes, and we have the capacity to, if someone, because the membership is a year long, a membership process takes a year, if they come and they've agreed to do a job and they don't do it, they're not there anymore. We send them away. And you can see that, it hasn't happened for a while, but people, because the domino effect in a complex, food producing community like that is the domino effect. It's a very short feedback loop. If you say you'll grow carrots and there's no carrots, and it's nothing to do with the weather or anything like that, then the feedback loop is very short. You lose that crop, someone else does it.
The next one is very simple, I think important for the audience to hear. I would like to ask you, what have been your biggest joy and satisfaction? Joys and satisfaction in living that lifestyle and being an intentional community, in having this true sharing?
Well, because I wanted community exceptionally badly. Exceptionally badly, I wanted community. That's why I put so much effort into it, is because we have community. We have this incredible system, and we do not have anyone in a positional power saying, you've got to do. There are no leaders. It's a non-hierarchical community where everyone's equal, and that's the thing I wanted to say. And you can't live without hierarchies, because they are part of the nature of existence is hierarchies. Everything's on a hierarchy. So there's a hierarchy of skill set which is respected. So if someone wanted to do something with carrots, they would come, and we'd have a little talk about it. Or if someone wanted to do something of tomatoes, because I won't go into details, they'd talk to the tomato person, or the cows, they'd talk to the cow people, or the cheese making. There is a respect of the skill set, and also of the time that the person has put into it, their particular area of the farm. There's that respect. Last year, SBS came, wanted to make some sort of documentary about us for their TV thing. And they came with their big intrusive lenses and were poking around. And they only wanted to speak to the youngest people in our community, who were, one was 21 and the other's about 35. So not counting the children. And the question they kept asking them, and I think this was a good thing that they were asking the youngest people, because they're very sensitive to hierarchies. And they kept saying, but who's the leader? How do you do this? Who's the leader? And they both kept saying, there is no leader. And the other interesting thing was, we didn't want their nosy cameras, and I didn't think there was any benefit in any way for us to have any publicity on national TV about it. But they were looking for the extraordinary. They were looking for, your cameras always want visual extraordinary. Well, visual extraordinary is the rainforest and so on. In looking for the extraordinary, they missed the extraordinary of the ordinary, because it's invisible. The fact that there are no leaders is extraordinary, and it's invisible unless you live there. So they didn't come, and we were glad about that. They want to see our abattoir. Well, because abattoir, that's something that people are going to either get really upset about or very excited about. That to them is, something. So we wouldn't show it to them, because it's medieval, and I love it. But, yeah.
Would you have...
And I understand people who don't love it. I don't have to say, I don't have to defend it. That's how we live. That's our choice. And I totally respect anyone who has a different choice. And that's where we have to come to, not to be trying to make someone fit into our choice mould.
I happen to agree with it. Do you have a personal story that you'd like to share, something that is deep for you that could have only happened in that context?
In our community. I think one of the most extraordinary things our community, which you couldn't show on TV either, is the fact that the most attractive piece of house building site we kept aside for a very long time, because we didn't want it to be taken by an individual. And we didn't know how we were going to use it. But it was, mostly our land's not flat, was flat. It had a road beside it, no trees to cut down, had 240 power, not all of the land has that, and it had the whole farm water system there. So it was a well-serviced site, and it was quite near the community house. And I think about 4 years ago, and it sat there, we hadn't used it, and we knew that we were thinking about how it would be used, not for an individual. And at one of our normal farm meetings that happen once a month, one of the younger people said, I think we need to make a decision about how we use that land, and I'd like to see a building put there that is suitable for older people so that they can stay on the farm and they can not have to go, no, this is what she said, they don't have to go off the farm to die. Now, just even using the word die, most people won't use that word. To start with, we have to use the real words for things. We have to face reality. And the most unlikely person to tear up over that, teared up over that. And I was so deeply touched by that. And what it told me is that we are a bonded, a word that I've started to use since that time, a bonded community. That people are valued in a way that, you know, is difficult. I know it's very difficult to look after older people. If you're you've got kids and you've got jobs and so on, but a community is able to do that. And that was the most touching thing and the most solid bit of evidence that my huge desire for community has come through.
Thanks for sharing. It's beautiful. Do you think that in a world that's more and more afflicted by disconnection, intentional communities, Ecovillage can give this sense of belonging or meaning?
Yes, I think belonging is something we all want. Is that right? Would you agree with it? Belonging. It can give you belonging if you allow it to. You know, it is totally up to the people to allow that. And the other thing is, because of my role as a teacher of the Buddha Dharma, I keep very close eye on what is being said about what's happening geopolitically, because it is often a question that's asked on retreats. And there's a lot of stuff being said about it. But the most common theme of all the philosophers that I'm attracted to are saying is that community is what is going to be our saviour in a very difficult coming time, because the climate is collapsing for whatever reason you think it is. It can be from whatever you think it is, but extreme weather is not something that's going to pass quickly, and the more difficult as the collapse happens is the supply chain breaks down, food becomes more difficult, all things, having an income become more difficult. The community is a very strong buffer against that. And being close to Lismore when it was completely destroyed by flood, the community came together in a most extraordinary way and didn't infight. And we don't, people always say, oh, communities always come together in a disaster. Well, that's true. But the disaster is all around us, and we have to start seeing that we don't just wait for a big flood or a big fire or a big something, that we're seeing it happening, that we're actually taking it in. You know how it's hard to take these things in. I've just been with a sick relative, and he very sick, and he said, I'm not taking this in. And it's very hard to take in the sickness of our culture, where it's got to. And you can create something that is an antidote to that, a small oasis. an antidote, a small oasis, because the book that interests me the most by Dougal Hine is called At Work in the Ruins. It is a very sensible book, and to me it gave a name for what I started in 1972, because the ruins were already happening then, have been happening over a long period of time. They're just escalated now. Is that our community is our work in the ruins, and everyone's got work in the ruins to do. It might not be community, but it's the giving and the kind work that you're doing. And it can be a very small oasis, but it's important that it's not dismissed, that it's your work in a collapsing geopolitical situation.
That's a very profound point. Speaks a lot about resilience.
Yes.
We ran out of time. I'm going to ask my last question. You're a teacher in mindfulness and deep listening?
Yes.
I'd like to know how that helped you in communities, and I'd like to know the connection you see between inner transformation and outer change.
Well, I think the whole conversation has been about inner transformation, so you can do the outer change of having a community. It requires letting go of all these habits of mind that the problem is out there, and the importance of having a skill in interpersonal relations. But the basic teaching is that a long meditative practice will lead you away from reaction towards equanimity. And that's what happens. Because anything you do from a reactive state of mind is not going to work out well. Is that right? Yes. Whether it's a small reaction or a giant reaction, anything that comes out of reactivity is not going to work out well, especially if you're in a community, a close community like that. So it leads you towards equanimity, to stay steady when everything around you is tumultuous, is in tumult or chaos, and that's how I see what's happening.
Do you have a collective meditation practice at Ramananda?
Well, we built a forest meditation centre in the forest for a teacher called Christopher Ditmas, and he used to come every year, and so that forest, and that was built in 1976. So that's a long time ago, but sadly, because of the escalation of big weather events, it's in a forest, and the forest a couple of years ago, just before the flood actually, the forest dropped its giant forest dropped itself, a lot of trees dropped itself on the meditation hall, and we made the very difficult choice of having to pull it down. It was just too dangerous.
You remained equanimous. Yeah.
Well, someone had to. Yes. So, and then the flood came, and our small because that was it was for large retreats and so on. Very basic, forest retreat centre, and our small meditation centre down by the creek next to the community house got washed away in the flood. So we lost two meditation places, but we've sort of made a place where on Friday mornings we sit together, and because Friday is our family work, what we call family work day, where everyone works on a project for the ongoing. It's how we do the maintenance or new projects or it happens on a Friday morning, or you can do it another time if you can't be there, whatever you look taking care of.
Thank you so much for all of this. On my podcast, at the end of each interview, I ask the speaker to do one thing: to imagine if the program was broadcasted to the entire world, what would be the message you want everyone to hear about the work, about what's driven you?
Well, well, first of all, shut off a bit of the opinion barrage that is coming in on us from everywhere, and turn inward and interrogate yourself really well about everything you do, and reduce the number of opinions you have to export onto other people.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. And place to Shane.
Thank you, Carol. Thanks. So Afterlee Ecovillage is the creation of basically 4 years of work, and it started out of what we're talking about, the natural disasters and COVID and all that, and the need for community. There was a huge amount of interest, being a person involved in community, of a flood of people coming to me wanting to live in community. And there just wasn't much opportunity out there. There was communities like Dumb and Under and things you could join, but there was a long process for those, and people wanted to start something new and be part of something new and big, and so there was a need that wasn't there. That I thought, okay, I've got some of the skills, and with a friend, Rolf, and a few others, we dreamed up this project. But when we say the word eco-village, what do we mean by eco-village? So I was trained in Findhorn, eco-village design, and I think Jen had a really good explanation of what eco-village is. And if so there's not, because no one else in the world has defined what an eco-village is, and it's a hard thing to define, but they actually say it's more than 20 adults, so they sort of have a number. They say if it's below that, it's more like a little like hamlet, whatever, not so much a village. So they actually have a number. So this is Jen that I was part of, still am, and does a lot of amazing work around eco-villages. But as we know with grassroots communities and eco-villages, it's a volunteer group, so it has its issues, and it has a lot of amazing potential, but it's run by volunteers, so it ebbs and flows in terms of impact. So they have a definition of intentional eco-villages. I've got someone that lived in Findhorn here. So intentional eco-villages, Dumb and Under would be an example of an eco-village. And there's quite a, you have to keep going. So Dumb and Under, there you go, is an Australian version of an intentional community, but there's many other examples. So that's what they call intentional communities. But the Eco-Village Network went further and said, you know what, the traditional villages out there in the world are actually eco-villages, in terms of they have the same grouping, like I've worked in some Aboriginal communities, they have pretty much the same problems intentional communities have. Dogs and cats, So just because they're an Indigenous community doesn't mean they're immune from the same issues of all living together. So the good thing though traditional eco-villages have is they have thousands of years of wisdom of how to get on and the culture there of dealing with those things. So the Eco-Village Network actually brings the wisdom of these intentional communities, of these traditional villages, into how we operate as intentional communities. So it's a really amazing. So there's a lot of work going on in traditional eco-villages. And basically what Jen does, come to traditional village and says, you are an eco-village, but if you want to continue, it's kind of like anti-capitalism, because they go into these communities and say, keep your culture, keep these traditions, and if you're going to adopt technologies, keep them green, and then you will be an eco-village continuing, because the problem with these traditional villages is that capitalism and the technology comes in and they start to get homogenized, so the eco-village movement is actually about decoupling from homogenization. So here's an Aboriginal community in Australia that's probably got very much the same issues as any other intentional community. And then you've got urban eco-villages, which are not as land-based, but they still have a lot of the same issues of intentional communities in terms of the social and the economic. And in Europe, there's a lot more of these urban eco-village examples. We have a good one here in Australia is the co-housing in Heidelberg. And it's about 18 families live there. And one of the founders of that Maranduka, she said going down to the common room was kind of like the wild space, because you never knew what was going to happen there. And that was their wild space in the urban environment. But what they say is they have the things in common eco-villages have is they use participatory processes. So what, like Carol was saying, the non-hierarchical participation of the members. So that's one common thing you have to be an eco-village. If you've got a sort of a non-participatory processes and everyone just follows one person, it's not really a proper eco-village. And they have a holistic perspective. They think of the whole, which is the social, economic and cultural dimensions. And they aim to actively regenerate social and natural environments. So then, an eco-village that might have amazing things in one area, but they forget about the natural environment, they're actually not thinking holistic. So yeah, it's one of these are the three things they say is the definition of an eco-village. So the inspiration from Afterlee is because of my involvement, but other people's involvements. We've already talked, like Carol here today, learning from the people to incorporate what can we do in Afterlee so we don't have the same mistakes. And so we've had people from Tunnel Falls come and talk, Witchcliff Eco Village, Crystal Waters, Narara. But also we've got inspiration from the Global Eco Village Network as well, from overseas. So what's Afterlee Ecovillage? And it's an intentional eco-village because it was created from a need. So there's an intention there. And the intention was for more community living options, affordable ownership of land and innovation, and seeking more self-sufficiency, less reliant, because of these disasters, people realise we can't trust the government as much as we thought we could. We want to start creating our own systems of reliance. So that was the need. So the land, we'll get to the vision that it should be there, but it's not. So the land, we chose 700 acres out in Kyogle. And there was a reason for this, is with the MO policy, the larger the piece of land, the more houses you can have. And the more houses we can have, the more affordable it can be. And also there's a whole lot of other benefits from the size. But the land is got good water, good access, had all the ingredients for a good site for an eco-village. So in terms of the agricultural land, it's got about 200 acres of agricultural land. and good volcanic soils, a lot of springs, and the plan is to keep at least 100 acres for agriculture with the design of the village. It has a lot of forest. One thing this property doesn't have a lack of is forest. It has 400 acres of forest, and it's pretty degraded forest, unfortunately. But one of the great things about the Ecovillage movement is it can help regenerate land. As I said, actively regenerate the land. So rather than buying pristine rainforest where we would have had an impact, a negative impact, we're going to have a very positive impact on these forests. And water, it's got abundance of water. It's a bit drier out in Kyogle, so not as many mould issues, which is great, but there's certainly a lot of water on the site. We've got this huge dam fed by 3 springs, never goes dry, that people around actually use as their water supply. And there's about, I think there's about 10 springs, a creek, other creeks. There's a lot of water, and in fact, if you dig in certain places, I'm sure there's going to be water coming out. And one of the benefits of this site was it had a primary school. So it's one of the only 2 primary schools in New South Wales where the Department of Education didn't own the land, it was leased. So when we bought the land, the school had been closed for a year because of lack of students, and the Department of Education just gave us the keys. So the co-op owns the school, and there's a school group formed to start thinking about how we're going to reopen that school. And it also has the RFS on the site, they lease from us. And this was the site of a village about 80 years ago. So there used to be a general store, and there used to be a butcher and a post office, so it was actually a village. So the beauty of this project as well is it's like recreating a village that was there. So that's quickly a base map. So as you can see, there's a lot of forest. The yellow areas are sort of the agricultural areas we're going to leave, and the pink areas are sort of the house sites. And what is up? It's run by a cooperative. A cooperative, now I wasn't really aware of how cooperatives run, now I'm really aware. And they're really a good legal entity to run land sharing communities. I would recommend co-ops any day of the week now. So there's currently 30 more than that now, so I think there's a few more shareholders. And we have a board that makes the day-to-day decisions, which means that if you don't want to make, I'm in a community with a company and we're all directors and we have to meet for every little thing. And I wish we could have just a few of us make the decisions sometimes, because sometimes you don't really care, or you just want other people to make the decision for you. And less meetings, so that's good. But it owns all the land, and so you buy into a share that owns all the land and the assets. But as a member, even though we have a board, there's major changes such as rules, policies. All members have to vote on that. And then once a year we have an election for the board members. And if there is a big swell, I guess, of members that say, hey, we actually want to make a decision on this, the co-op rules actually says the board has to then create a meeting and a voting. So even if there's something the board could make a decision on, if it's felt really strongly, then all the members have to make a decision on. We have a set of legal rules, which is how the co-op operates, but we also have a land sharing policy in terms of how we live there. We can create policies as well as we go along. So that's the cooperative. And people have asked what makes it different to other land sharing communities, this project? Because there's, over 200 MOs in the area. What makes this project different? So its size is one of them. I forgot to put Bill and Cliff's, but Burling Cliffs is a strata title. But it'll be in the top 10 basically of size in Australia for eco-villages. So that makes a huge difference from other MOs. It's planned village layout. So one of the differences as well is we designed a village, which most MOs don't. They have sort of scattered housing, but it's a lot of work to look after an acre in this environment. And some people aren't as land-based as others, and may not want to look after a whole acre. So we created a village which also will create an atmosphere of like a hub of the community. So that's one of the unique things. The professional assistants, so have myself and others come in to help this process that usually would take a very long time to get to where we are now. The members might feel like this is going very slowly, but it's actually going very fast. Some groups meet for 5 years before they buy land. We've only been operating for 2.5 years. And also we're planning to have a lot of community infrastructure. So some MOs don't have any community infrastructure. I have the belief if you don't even have a community house or something like that, then it's really hard to call yourself a community. But this is going to have possibly a lot more than just that. The members recently voted for a microgrid, so the central area is actually going to have its own, the co-op's going to be an electricity supplier with a microgrid. Looking at how being hot summers and we're not near the beach, swimming is really important, especially for the kids and everything, so how can we create a really good recreational swimming environment? A community multi-purpose hall is definite. There's a school already there. Food production areas, nursery. We're talking about a big shed as one of the first things we're going to build out there, like a maker's shed, we're calling it. We're also going to have non-potable water to a lot of the sites, irrigation, wastewater, even central wastewater for the village area. So a lot more infrastructure than a normal MO, which also means the co-op, we also, more than just looking after land, we're looking after infrastructure as well. And possibly a future cafe down on the road is one of the, maybe 5 years or something when there's enough people there. Because we have beautiful national parks 5-10 minutes away, campers, and we're 20 minutes from Kyogle, so if we had a little shop cafe there, it would probably be enough visitors. So that's just an idea of the planned microgrid through the village to service the houses. So it's been a big thing in the last 6 months with the members and community discussing is it worth it, basically. These are the 4 regenerative areas that the GEM look at in terms of ecological sustainability and the values. So we have a site visit, so every second Saturday of the month should be in there. We have a site visit. If you go back. And the site visit, we usually time it for the working bees on the land, so you meet some of the future members, get a feel of the land, and it's a prerequisite, so we don't have people buying in until they've seen the land and felt the land. And if you don't feel the land, then maybe it's not for you. The land is a big, I've been involved in some eco-village processes, and I used to think you had to plan the whole vision and for years and everything, and get everything. And then the problem I've worked out is actually the land dictates sometimes what the community is going to look like. So you could have these amazing visions you come up with for years, but then when you have to go buy the land, it doesn't match the vision. So the land dictates a lot what the community is going to be like. And then you apply, submit an application for the board to consider. The board will have a bit of a chat to you, and then if you're success, then you pay $600. I think they've changed it. So you pay $300 to apply, and then $300 if it's success. And then you pay for the share, and the big issue, people have been asking, can we get a bank loan for a share? Unfortunately, we're not there yet. We haven't worked out a financial institution that will work with it, so usually it's like, people don't have the full money, then you have to look for private finance. This is something the co-op's looking at. How can we help people? Because the idea is we don't want people to come onto the community, and if it's their you don't want the financial, sort of barrier. If they're a really good person and really keen to live in community, we don't want that to be a barrier for people. Questions? Yeah.